Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. We have a very exciting and important topic to cover with you today, and that's the power of financing. And we have some really good gold nuggets we're going to drop on you today. We're going to be talking about one of the lenders that we're now hooked up with that is changing our business, and it's a really, really impactful lender that everyone should hook up with. And that's one of our sponsor partners, Arlington Financial. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about what they offer, how they're unique, and we're going to go into more detail about how we leverage financing to grow and expand our business.
Yeah, it's amazing to me. Obviously, we're working with companies all over the country and actually in other countries around the world. How many companies are not offering financing? And fortunate for me, I grew up with a company that offered it from day one, so I don't know any different. But I can't imagine having any level of success that we had without the power of financing, and not just offering it, but knowing how to sell it the right way and train your sales force on how to sell it the right way. So it's an art form that definitely needs to be mastered by your organization, and that's what we're going to talk about.
Well, yeah, and I can tell you from my experiences back in 2007, 2008, when the economy collapsed, that one of the most detrimental aspects of that whole thing was that the lenders folded up, and they began to shut down their home improvement lending divisions, and so that was really, really crippling to the industry. The thing about what we're experiencing now that I think is kind of the silver lining is the lenders are still there and they're still going strong. Some of them have tightened their requirements. So during the quarantine phase of late March through early June, we were really scrapping to keep the revenue coming in, and we did a good job with the virtual selling and those strategies. But what we noticed is that our decline rates did spike. We were seeing more finance rejects than normal. I'm not sure if any of you are experiencing that, but we do get a lot of clients asking if that's happening at Matrix Home Solutions, and it was, quite candidly. So we got in touch with the lender by the name of Arlington Financial. It was actually a referral from my brother Nathan. I don't try to reinvent the wheel. If I'm struggling, I'll usually reach out to someone who maybe knows more than I do. Yeah. He gave me this referral to Arlington Financial. Since early June, they've picked up $930,000 in business that would have otherwise been straight up declined by every other lender we work with, almost $1 million.
Yeah, so just a few months.
So you figure, extrapolate that over a year's time, that could be $4 million in business that we would have otherwise lost. So what does that do for your bottom line to be able to pick up those deals that you're losing currently? What's that do for your metrics to the cost of a fully loaded issued appointment? You take that NSLI, it's going to go up through the roof if you're picking up more deals. And so it kind of ties back to the topic of today's conversation, which is why it's important to have a mix of lenders you work with, why it's important for your reps to be trained properly on how to leverage that financing and be a master of it in the house, and how impactful it is. And we're finding that a lot of companies, this is an area where they need to brush up.
Yeah, and on that topic, I mean, aside from the financial benefits that you just described where you're getting $1 million you otherwise wouldn't have had, you think about what that does to the morale of your sales team. So I'm talking with companies all over right now where their sales team's getting crushed mentally because everything they're trying to finance right now is getting declined. Whereas if you have a lender like Arlington that's there to save the day and pick up those customers that would have otherwise been overlooked, that keeps that momentum going. It keeps the sales force, their mindset right. It keeps the morale up of your sales team, and it just snowballs into greater success. And that's why it's important to diversify when we're getting into this, because you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, have your sales reps go through a rash of declines, and then it just crushes them mentally and, of course, affects the performance company-wide.
So before we go into more detail about Arlington, and we're going to give you the contact information, it should be on the screen. We'll have it up at the end as well, so you can reach out to them if you're not already working with them. But I wanted to talk to Dominic a little bit today, being the master sales trainer of the universe. And, I know that in your training curriculums, you always made it a point to set aside time for financing.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, we suggest that you make the training you administer on the financing side of things just as intensive as you would on the step selling methodology or on your products and services.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that training, kind of what it looked like, how you structured it, and how important was that to you over your career of managing and training salespeople?
Yeah, it's one of the most important things you can possibly train on. And I was just telling Nick a story. I did a podcast yesterday with a gentleman by the name of Paul Atherton. And he was a guy that sold in the UK for a company called Everest. It was the biggest home improvement company in all of the UK. And he initially got exposed to this company because he worked for a company called First National Bank, and they did the lending for all the biggest home improvement companies. And Paul Atherton would come in and train the company on how to sell financing, how to fill out credit apps. And Everest was so impressed with this guy's ability to train on financing, they actually got rid of their other sales trainer and brought in this guy to retrain the whole sales team. And he ended up growing that company to $150 million, the biggest company in the history of the UK. So what's my point? Financing needs to be really at the heart of your training. And a lot of people wonder, how do I do a 3-week training? Well, pretty much 1 full week of that is just closing and financing. How to use financing in the close. You need to really spend that much time, and it's not just enough to train it week 1 or during the initial training. It's ongoing.
Sure.
Pretty much every sales meeting agenda, financing is on the agenda to a certain extent every single week. Because always things you got to sharpen up on, things you got to brush up on. But yeah, it was an absolute vital part of the whole sales training process.
Yeah, and the lenders are ever changing, they're evolving, they're adapting to market conditions, their algorithms could change, their requirements.
Yeah.
Certain plans they may roll out or discontinue. So staying on top of that and maintaining it's important. But just, to clarify, when you're going through your formal training with your team, definitely set aside the time for that training. Make sure that you get the lenders involved. Normally they'll get on a Zoom call, they'll help you with that training. But what that training consists of is the rep understanding fundamentally, administratively, how to handle simple things like processing an application, dealing with e-documents, handling stipulations or different POI requirements, and fetching all that information and submitting it, and really dotting all the I's and crossing the T's. And I know that a big core strength of our organization is that the reps are responsible for handling that while they're in the house.
Right.
It's taboo, and there better be a really good reason for why they walk out of a house without satisfying that whole lending portion of it.
Right.
Because we find more often than not, if they don't satisfy everything while they're there, and they can't close it all down and lock it all down while they're there, we lose those deals.
Yeah, they wiggle off. Yeah, you don't want any loose ends, and that's why it's important to invest the time to train your salespeople. If you get salespeople that are calling you on a higher authority close, for example, and they haven't figured out all the money questions, how they're going to pay for it, that's a result of them not being knowledgeable or comfortable enough getting into that financial discussion. So I always train my sales force, throughout the presentation, you're really the guidance counselor, you're going to guide them in the right direction. But when you get to the close, now you're the financial advisor, and you need to be completely comfortable, completely relaxed, obviously smile, and you got to be able to guide them through that financial discussion as the expert in the room. And if you get the right training and you really take a responsibility for being knowledgeable on the subject, you will be. But customers are going to follow along the process as long as you're comfortable, confident, and relaxed having that conversation about financing, because it's a very personal discussion to have with a client.
And we're going to elaborate on today's call a little bit about how you sell and offer the financing in the house, some best practices. But just to get through this one talking point, just to kind of clarify, the training should be structured. It should be a part of your training in the class. There should be a test out there. Yeah. I would recommend you create cheat sheets for the team so that everything is right there for them in their briefcase. Your merchant number, how to log into the portal, how to download that app, all of it. Make it dummy proof for the rep so that if they get stuck, they can just find that cheat sheet and they can keep moving, and they don't look like they're unprofessional or unprepared, because that could queer the sale, right?
Yeah, and one thing you did that was absolutely priceless is obviously taking the time to make those videos. Literally training tutorial videos on how to process financing, because the banks and the lenders, they'll have videos on how to process the loans and stuff, but it doesn't have a lot of the sales elements to it that are necessary to be successful. And those are things that we can do here at Grasso University. Obviously, we can guide you through making your own training videos, but that's something that's really important so your salespeople have a sound grasp on the psychology of it and really how to be comfortable having that conversation.
Absolutely. And then the other best practice I would say, like administratively, is having someone internally, and I'm sure you do, someone who's receiving the orders, processing them, reviewing the paperwork, chasing down the deposits and making sure those go in the bank. Call the lenders the very next day. Call them on the phone and just make sure everything is good to go. Even if you think everything is good to go, it looks good in the portal, everything looks solid, my recommendation is you call anyway, get somebody on the phone and just double check. Because I've seen it where we think everything's good, we've satisfied the stipulations, the e-docs have been signed, and then for whatever reason it didn't make its way to the bank, there was a glitch in the technology, or something else is required, and now we're sitting around waiting for weeks to get stage funded on a job, and we're getting prepared to perform that work, and the loan isn't even solidified yet. That's dangerous. So just to watch out for your own cash flow, make sure you call that lender the next day and make sure that everything's good with that loan before you take action.
Yeah, and even simple things. Some of these lenders, they have multiple stages in the approval process where the sales rep will get an approved application, but he doesn't activate the account, right, and get it authorized and get the security questions, answered. And for some reason, this loan's hanging up pending for weeks because no one caught it in time. So it's just little things like that. And this is why it's important that your salespeople get that initial training on the nuances of financing, how to process it, how to sell it. It's going to save you a boatload of headaches on the back end, especially change orders and making trips back out in a lot of cases.
And to Dominic's point, don't think that's good enough, because it won't be. Like everything else, you have to continue to mold and reinforce. That's why it's important in your sales meetings you make that a part of your meeting, the maintenance, the housekeeping as we refer to it.
Yes.
And if I notice a new rep or a current veteran, if they're struggling with the financing and I sense that, I'm very quick to get them in for training. I'm not going to wait till the next sales meeting, because that makes me very nervous. If they're not aware of how to process a loan, that's almost as bad as walking in there without a contract for them to sign.
For sure.
So you can't go in there battling with a broken sword. Next thing, financing should be something that you're using in your advertising. So that's another little tidbit. But if you're set up with multiple lenders and you have great plans to offer, and you should, make sure that's a part of your marketing and your advertising. Not only should that be in all of your advertising as a call to action, but your call center, when they're scheduling appointments, should also reinforce and talk up the financing one more time before the rep walks in the home. We want to plant that seed, and we want to normalize and introduce that financing early on and often, because our sales methodology is crafted in a way where we front load it so that we're eliminating all the potential objections before we ask them for their business. We funnel everything down to one thing, and that is
affordability.
Making it affordable, right? So one of the key pre-closing questions is, if we can make this 100% affordable and comfortable for your budget, is it safe to assume we can get you started?
Yeah.
And if the answer is yes, and it should be 9 times out of 10, now you better know those rate sheets cold.
Yeah.
You better know exactly how to maneuver through one lender to the next to find that plan that's going to satisfy that homeowner. That's how I sell in the house and close. It makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, and I love uncovering that in the needs analysis, right? So they say, I saw your ad on TV, or I saw you have a billboard, or I saw you on social media. And obviously, I always train our salespeople to ask, what specifically about the ad stood out to you and caught your eye, to call us now of all times. And if they alluded anything to the financing, I always had to try to prevent myself from drooling, because I knew I was like this close. If they're a finance buyer, because I know I can do a masterful job selling the company and the product. Now that they're a finance buyer, I got them right where I want them. Now I have all the leverage in the world, and that's the beauty of it, especially if you know how to sell it.
Yeah, and I have some questions for you here in just a second about that part of the process, presenting the financing, selling the value of the financing. But one more little thing, too, that should precede that is, in your company's story, you should make sure you have a slide that highlights all the lenders you work with, and make it a point to emphasize how that's a unique proposition, because not every contractor out there is set up with multiple lenders, credible lenders that offer the services that ours do. And so that's one more way to differentiate your company. And you should ask those key questions when you're differentiating and building value, such as, why do you suppose most contractors are unable to offer financing services like we provide? Well, that's because it takes a certain number of years in business. It takes a certain financial stability in order to have that resource for your customers. We have that with some of the lenders you may have heard of that are pretty predominant. Now, if they're willing to partner with us, what does that say about the quality of our company? I know you've collected multiple quotes. Candidly, it sounds like some of them came in with some pretty aggressive proposals. Did anyone else bring up financing or talk about that with you? And if the answer is no, well, why do you suppose that is? So does that make you wonder, maybe if they don't have that, if there could be an underlying issue? So you got to kill your competition during your whole presentation, and that part of it should be emphasized, and you should brag about the fact that you have that. Get the homeowner to come to terms with the idea of it before you even get into your price, and it's going to make closing the sale that much easier.
Yeah, and Grouse University, we talk a lot about seeding and layering. And obviously seeding, you plant a thought in a prospect's mind, and layering, constantly reinforce that thought so it nurtures into the belief system, right? So you want to be bringing up the topic of financing early in the process, preferably in your intro or needs analysis, your survey, right? And once you have that established, throughout the company's story and throughout the entire process, you're really touting about how that sets you apart from the competition, and you can really brag about it. Because I'm sure you had this happen to you, Nick, but I've had in certain negotiating situations where the customer has other proposals, some of them half our price. And the fact is they can't afford it because they don't have $10,000 cash laying around. Now, even though we're at $20,000, the fact that we're only at $200 a month, they're like, well, yeah, you're the only one that's affordable, so we're going to go with you. It was literally one of the big reasons why they could afford doing business with us and not anybody else.
And that's why it's important. It's in your marketing. That's why it's important they know it's there.
Right.
Because you're going to attract people that maybe otherwise wouldn't have picked up the phone. So the really important points we're making here, and hopefully you guys are taking notes. Now let's segue into being at that kitchen table, getting ready to present that retail proposal, whether it's a 30-day or 1-year quote. Tell the audience a little bit about how you navigate through that as a salesperson, how you train the reps on how to sell the value of that financing. What does that cadence look like?
Yeah, so, obviously in the beginning stages of closing, especially if you know they're a finance buyer, you got that in your pocket. One thing you want to train your reps to do is get the no's out of the way, right? So we train in our retail closes to do 3 closes at retail, which include price delivery, financial terms, and ROI. So essentially what I want to do is deliver that price masterfully, and we got a whole course on just price delivery we're not going to get too in-depth on. But once I deliver that price and the customer gives me any rebuttal, positive or negative, the good news is you can transition right into financial terms the same way. Now, in the survey, one thing I was going to talk about, I bring up the fact early, this is one of those seeds that I plant, that when we get to the monthly investment terms, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, one thing I want to promise you, affordability is our best feature. As a matter of fact, our financing plans are so incredible that most of the cash buyers are taking advantage of them right now because they're so appealing. So I plant that seed early in the process. Then when I get to the financial terms and the close, obviously I'm comfortable bringing up that conversation once again that most of our cash buyers are taking advantage of these because they're so appealing. Because you got to be careful. Now, if I get into financial terms and I say, now, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, if and when you were to handle this, would this be something you do as a cash investment, write a check for? Or something like most of our customers, keyword most of our customers, you do as a monthly investment or installment plan, right? And then obviously, if they say cash, you got to be careful. And this is getting very in-depth and we can go on for hours, but a lot of times when customers says cash, what do they mean? They're going to go to their bank and get a home equity loan, or they're going to take out a personal loan for the project. So your reps should be trained on how to sell against that stuff. So even if someone's going to get a home equity loan, a very easy line to transition back to your financing, hey, great, it sounds like you got a good relationship with your bank. What a lot of our customers do is compare our rates and plans with their bank to see which one comes in best. So let me just show you a few of our most popular options. Let me know which one works best for you. And then being able to educate the client, and this is where we're going to talk about, on the difference between secured and unsecured financing, you can overcome that 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, so there's a great video in our training portal that goes into real depth about how we sell the value of the financing, the conversation we have with the homeowner, how we proceed through that process, and we encourage you to subscribe so you can see this great video. But some of the bullet points of it is, for one, when we present that initial proposal, no matter what, they're always going to be flabbergasted by what? The total investment, right?
Total
Everything's
investment.
relative to starting point. Regardless of what number you lead with, they're always going to say it's what?
Too much.
Too much money, right? But you want to get them off of that and start getting into financial terms so you can make it a little bit of an easier pill for them to swallow, get them off that total number. To Dominic's point, especially if they can't afford to pay cash or even afford to put down a 10% deposit, what difference does it make to dwell on that total number? They may not like it. That doesn't mean we can't make it affordable for them.
Yeah. And to extract the information you seek, it's important to remain the if and when stage at the beginning of that financial conversation. Because if I'm talking to Nick right now, I'm saying, Nick, if we were to get this project started right now, how would you handle it? Is this something you could write a check for today? Or is it? So it's a lot different approach. It comes off a little too aggressive. If I remain in the if and when stage, even though I know mentally I'm there to close them now, they're going to be a lot more apt to give me the information I'm looking for. So again, just to repeat that, I deliver a price, they give me whatever response. They could even say, holy crap, there's no way I can afford that. No problem, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, I completely understand. Now let me ask you, if and when you were to move forward with a project like this, how would you handle it? Is this something you'd handle as a cash investment, write a check for, or something like most of our customers, you take it out on a monthly investment or a budget plan? Now, do not allow your salespeople to use the word payment. This is not a payment. Those of you watching, who likes payments? Now, who likes investments that give them a return? Everybody, right? So initial investment, monthly investment, total investment. You want to be, again, planting that in their mind the whole time. It's going to make it a lot easier to have that conversation.
Yeah, you want to be persuasive and you want them to hear what you're saying, so you don't want to induce a fight or flight scenario.
Yeah.
And when I introduce the financing and I bring up the, alternative choice, if you were to move forward within the next year, when you're ready, how do you suppose you'd want to handle the total investment? And would you look to use our financing or explore your own resources? And we get into that discussion. I think it's important at that moment to prop up the financing a little more as well by hitting on some of the key points. So some of the key points I like to hit on are that this is an investment, not an expense. So we're going to be improving your home. And I'm sure that you didn't write a check for your home, right? Most people are financing their home, but they're comfortable with it because they assume that home over time is going to gain value. It's a big investment, so obviously it's a lot of money to put down. When people are improving their homes, they kind of liken it to that, and that's how they feel more comfortable with financing. Beyond that, our lending, though, is much different from the lending you're going to find in the secured world when you're buying a house, for example. This is all unsecured lending. Now, the beauty of that is it is instantaneous. So there's no arduous process of paperwork this thick to have to go
jumping through hoops.
I literally have an app on my phone. I can scan your driver's license, put in your social, gives us an instant answer. So it's fast. And the nice thing about that is it saves us time and aggravation. Beyond that, there's no collateral involved. So the bank isn't leaning your property like they would with a secured loan. Now, I know you're going to pay for this if you do decide to move forward. However, if for some reason you weren't able to, they're not going to repossess this home. They're not going to repossess this improvement. So it's a very safe loan for you to embark on should you qualify. So can you see how a lot of our customers err to the side of financing? I'd say 70% of the time they're financing all of or a portion of the project.
Yeah. So to your point, Nick, and basically what Nick's talking about, the more painless, effortless, and the easier you can make this whole process seem, that's going to lower their sense of fear about moving forward, right? So I want to keep them comfortable and relaxed about this conversation. I just want to make this seem like a very simple, smooth operation. It's stress-free, worry-free. You don't have to get dragged through the mud or jump through all these hoops, and it's going to make them a lot easier for them to take that leap. Not that it's just daunting thing that they have to jump through, like the last time they got a loan through their bank, and it took them 5 weeks to get an answer, and then they got declined on top of it, right? But I always said to my customers, this is a line my dad always used to tell me. He's like, Dominic, if you owe $1 to the bank, you don't own anything, because they can always do what? They can always take it. And I would actually have the customer fill in that gap. So I said, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, my father always told me when I was a kid, if you owe $1 to the bank, you don't own anything, because if you don't pay it, they could always do what? They could take it, right? And the customer would fill in the gap. So then they're basically killing the bank for you. And you can obviously, if you want to get really in depth, you can educate them on what a HELOC loan really is and the rates. They hook you in with the low promo rate of 1.9, then it jumps up to the prime rate, and then it's variable up to 15%. So it's really easy to kill a lot of these secured loans versus the unsecured loans that we can offer. It's completely painless, stress-free, and we can get it done just like that.
Yeah, be confident, enthusiastic, excited about it. I think that sells, right, when you're enthusiastic. Smile. I'm really enthusiastic about the financing because I believe in it.
Yeah.
I really do. I see how it helps our customers afford improvements they really want and need. And absent of that, we wouldn't be able to help them.
Right.
So I really do look at it that way. Now, a couple other little tips. We don't want to give away everything because there is an educational platform that we want you to go into to learn this and more. And there's a video that goes on for an hour about just selling the value of the financing. But a couple things I want to point out is when we're leading with that retail proposal, I like to lead with the financing plans that they may balk at. By design, I intentionally will lead with plans that I know they're going to object to, whether that's a higher interest rate, higher payment type of program,
That's good.
or a short-term no interest plan, whether it's a 0% for 1 year or a no for 6 months. Because we're delivering basement proposals, so those are big numbers.
Giving your best finance plan is just as bad as giving your best price first. So you always want to give yourself room to go. And it's almost like no matter where you start, what's the customer going to do? They're going to want more, right? So by keeping those discounts in your back pocket, by keeping those sweeter finance plans in your back pocket. Rick Ross always said, if you give them your best price, your best plan first, and the customer says, no, where do you go? Home, So that's a very good point is, lead with plans that you almost know that they're not going to take, and it's going to lead to you being able to extract an offer potentially out of them or get them to tell you where they would like to be. And then miraculously later on in the process, voila, we can come to an agreement on it, and we know where we're going to lead them. So
we haven't presented any urgency. We haven't gotten into the discussion of earning their business today. So we're going to use this opportunity to continue to price condition them. So I look at conditioning them on the financing the same way like we would with that total number we're leading with, knowing we have room to wiggle. But lead with those plans you know they may object to. Isolate the investment down to financing. Isolate the objections to be mainly based on affordability. And then when they tell you what they will inevitably, which is, well, your total investment's a little more than we were hoping for. There's no way we could pay for this. We would need financing, but there's no way that plan or that payment or that interest rate would work for me. Now I have a tangible objection that I can deal with and overcome. And that's what we want. We want to pull out the root of the real objection. So when someone says they can't afford it or it's a lot of money, you should isolate that objection and probe to learn more about what that means, because that's vague, right? So when you say it's a lot of money, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, and keep in mind, this quote's good for 1 year, so you're under no obligation. But when you say it's a lot of money, what part of that is it that's uncomfortable for you? Is it the total investment, the initial deposit, or is it the monthly investment that has you concerned? And we'll say one of the three or all of the three, right? Now I know where I might have to go next with what I'm going to offer. So it's really important that you understand there's a financial architecture to everyone's decision-making process. When I say architecture, that's kind of how I look at it. And that's how I actually, those are the words I use in the house, is Mr. and Mrs. Jones. Most people at this point in the meeting tell me if we can make this work for their financial architecture, that we're in a good position to earn their business. Is that how you guys feel?
Yeah, that's awesome.
And when I talk about architecture, it's total investment, it's initial deposit, it's cash versus finance, and then it's which plan, which payment, which term, which interest rate. I got to check all those boxes off so that that architecture makes sense for them and for their budget, and it makes them comfortable. Then asking for the business is easy. So you have to break it down for them. If they don't understand exactly how the financing works, what's expected of them, when their payments are going to start, what they're going to be, what the interest rates is, or prepayment penalties. If you don't make them fully aware of it, it's going to be hard to ask them for their business because they're going to be nervous and uncomfortable, and rightfully so. So with that in mind, just make sure you guys are educated. Now, we're not going to give away the farm on these subjects, although we did a lot already.
Yeah, we can go on for hours.
We're going to move now into using the financing as a boomerang to the close, and that's quite simple. Again, identify the objection. And my techniques and the way I like to go about it is if I know that financing is critical, and I know I have to go to a plan that has a really low payment factor or a longer-term no-interest plan, I'm going to do very little, if any, discounting to that total investment. And now my initial visit savings or that offer I'm going to make them upon earning their business that day is going to pivot around that financing plan that satisfies that objection. And again, the video we have in our portal goes into deep depth on this, but it's a great way to close sales more profitably. And that's really what's important here, because without the financing, your profitability is going to suffer. Your average ticket's going to suffer. Your closing rate's going to suffer.
Yeah, I made that mistake when I was a rookie. I fell into this trap, and I'm sure salespeople and even owners that are watching this, you may have done this yourself, is you lead with your best finance plan first. Whether it's like let's say something crazy like 5 years interest free if you have that available, right? So I would lead with that, thinking that I can just shortcut the process. And I would be discounting. The customers like, nah, as long as we can still get that finance plan, we're going to think about it, right? And I didn't have any leverage anymore because I gave them everything that I had, and the financing to them was more important than the price. So that's what Nick's talking about. You can do the opposite now, is use that financing as the initial visit reward, as that incentive to move forward, that sweeter plan. And that, for a lot of customers, is the incentive to move forward. Simply making that monthly a little bit more affordable, so it likens more to what their cell phone bill is, or you can, build it into their fuel savings and show it with energy savings. You're only out of pocket $99 a month, less than $3 a day, cup of coffee, reduced to ridiculous. There's so much power when we get into the financing world. And if you want a lot of training on that, like Nick said, we have hours and hours of content on our platform that we dive incredibly deep into this subject. But getting back to the root of it all, you got to have the lenders behind you to make that possible.
Well, and quite candidly, what we've talked about already, and that was just a sampling, if you take all of that, which we just mentioned, and you implant that into your organization, you will be making more money. So hopefully you guys take off like a rocket ship after this webinar today. Now, one last thing I want to cover is, the importance of having a waterfall, so to speak, having a good first, second, third look lending resource, probably multiple as well. Because as Dominic pointed out to me earlier when we were talking before the webinar, and it dawned on me that this is one more thing I had to add to my cheat sheet, and that is that these lenders, some of them at least look at different credit bureaus. So it's important to know with these lenders you're working with, what bureau they're looking at, and then when you're in your closing sequence, when someone's committing, you should probably, get into the subject of, do you have a credit report handy? Do you use any type of services where you can pull your credit real fast? Yeah. See what bureau is reflecting the highest score, and then that would be the one you'd want to take them to first. That alone is going to make you more money.
Yeah.
But more importantly, in the purpose of today's webinar, it's powered by Arlington Financial, and that's not just because they're sponsoring us, it's because they are near and dear to our heart. We picked up almost $1 million in business so far in the last 2 months that we would have lost otherwise. So if not for any other reason, you have to call Arlington and get set up with them, because they are picking up business that every other lender has declined across the board. Now, they don't want to be positioned just as a last look lender. They do have first look programs. They have an array of different things they can do for you, with you. However, in this current environment, they're picking up a lot that no one else even will touch.
Right.
Not only that, what I like about this lender is they're a little more boutique from the standpoint that I can get a hold of people there that make decisions. So one thing I've really worked hard at as an owner of a home improvement company is building really good relationships with those people at those lenders that are higher up the food chain, because they'll help me every now and then.
Yeah.
Whether that's take one more look at an application and push it through, or they'll let me know why we couldn't get it approved and what I can do to get it approved, and they'll give me more intel than maybe just that customer service representative that's picking up the phone. So get connected with these people and get to know them, because they will help you. And again, $930,000 in business we would have otherwise lost. Now, if we do $40 million this year in business, and they pick up $4 million that we would have otherwise lost, that represents 10% of our total net revenue. So what would that do otherwise to our NSLI, our marketing spend, our net profitability if we didn't have them? It's critical you set up with them if you're not already working with them. So we're going to put their information up on the screen so you get a hold of them. Their number is 888-225-0332, or you can email info@funfastonline.com. So there's so much more we could talk about. We hope you enjoyed this today. Get on our educational platform, because there you're going to see so much more on how to sell financing, how to sell the value of financing. There's so much valuable information in there. We welcome you to join us.
Yeah, and we can go in depth not just on how to sell financing from a sales standpoint, but how to structure your training in a way where you're able to train your sales team effectively on how to understand it and use it as the boomerang to the sale. Because again, there's so many nuances we weren't even able to get into in this webinar for sake of time. But if you want to give us a call, again, it doesn't cost anything to reach out to us. We're always up for giving you a 30-minute little consultation. You can tour the platform. We can show you some of those videos, see what it's all about. And you can decide for yourself if it's something you can put to work for you and your team to help grow and obviously get through this difficult time we're all trying to navigate right now.
Well, and to be candid, I mean, that's a soft way of inviting you guys to learn more, but here's the reality of it. What we just talked about, if you get involved with our program, the cost of being on the platform is going to be minuscule in comparison to what you're going to earn as a result of all this valuable information that we know about, because we're in the trenches with you. We're running successful home improvement companies, and we're doing it. So we're not just preaching from the pulpit like some of the other trainers out there. They haven't processed a loan application in the last 50 years. We're doing it, and we have the answers. So please do not miss out. I'm sure Matt will do a little demo of the platform here to wrap up. We appreciate you guys joining us. Make it a great day.
Yes, you are a closer.